Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries podcast. Today it's me and Raj. Ben, I think he's we don't have an RTP on him yet. He's away on other things. But Raj, how are you doing today?
I'm good, mate. Just looking forward to this Arsenal-Chelsea match here in a couple hours. So we'll see how that turns out.
Is looking forward to it the right terminology that we want to be using right now?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I mean, for me, I always want to see how a team responds to the challenges, because whether you look forward or not, it's going to happen. And so you might as well look forward and hope the team rises to that challenge. I mean, the biggest thing for me, I think I was upset versus Brighton first half because that game plan was never going to work, and you knew it. You know, Lukanda as a lone six, too much responsibility on him. So at least second half versus Brighton, and then versus Southampton, at least we played in the right structure. So even if you play and set your team up to play to give them a chance for success, then I can't be upset, right? Because then a lot of it just comes down to individual quality, especially for us recently in the final third, which, I mean, it's been that expected versus actual XG is like -9. Oh. So you got to be better in the box, obviously. And so we'll see. It'll be interesting versus Chelsea as well. I mean, out of the Champions League, right, off a good result, if I remember correctly. And so it'll be an interesting match. Of course, always go to Stamford Bridge is always difficult. But, Arsenal in big matches under Arteta have fared or at least played relatively well. And so we'll see. Obviously, lost 3 in a row, so you don't want to go into that fourth one. And so this is it's a potentially a big result. I mean, if you can even get a point out of it, it really puts them in a good position, at least for top 6. So we'll see.
Well, this brings us on to the discussion today of, one of the reasons why we're a bit reticent to be excited about an Arsenal game, because it's the Partey injury update. So the latest from the 15th of April is from Mikel Arteta. He said that the news that we got after another assessment is not looking very positive for availability this season. At the moment, we're not very optimistic. So that is his right thigh injury there. But then, news seems to change ever so quickly in football. And there was a video on social media of him cycling, and then all of a sudden the narrative seems to have turned on its head. I mean, Raj, you're smiling there. Is this, almost a false flag? Is this a situation where people who don't really understand the situation are getting excited? Oh, he's back in training, whatever. But this doesn't mean that Partey is going to be back soon, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't really mean much. He's cycling on a bike, so it's not even, impact or anything like that. Cycling on a bike doesn't really put much load on that right quad or hip flexor, right? So it's a mild stretch, really. It's a mild stretch and activation, but relatively low level. So it's good for conditioning, and it may or may not mean anything. We have to see how he really responds to higher intensity physio and then return to play to get any kind of feel for it. And then I think fans, latch on to any hope that they can. And then it's the hope that can kill you. So, I was probably on Twitter for like a good hour yesterday trying to go through and temper people's expectations. Like, dude, this doesn't mean anything.
I mean, with the kind of return to play for players, then is this just kind of like not even a near to returning to the pitch marker, or can this actually be a positive that he might be returning soon? I mean, from your understanding of the process of how players come back to the pitch, could this be a positive at all?
I think it's more of a positive than a negative, right? To see him doing that, but it's still, even if a player, when they're coming back early stages of an injury, especially at the elite level, you want them to maintain some level of conditioning. And so that's what that is in this case. So the major question really becomes is what happens when you put more load on it, right? Whether it's targeted exercises or whether it's running, whether it's then football specific work. So this is just, it's too low level with not enough demand on where his injury is to tell us anything. So, and honestly, what if he did that cycling session yesterday and he had a bad response? We don't even know.
Yeah.
So we don't even know that. We don't know how he responded to it. So
This is the thing that always happens when we discuss it with Ben as well, is kind of we're not privy to what happens after those sessions. Quite often, I remember a little bit earlier in the season, there was pictures of Ben Chilwell. He was running out on the pitch and people thought, oh, he's going to be returning soon. And then we hear
Yeah.
just a little bit later that actually there was a setback in his injury. So we will be waiting on that news and the situation there. And just quickly, we've discussed this before, but I'll give you kind of more time to go into it because I'm not sure if you kind of explained it, but your belief is that he is the biggest loss to the team this season. I mean, we have seen almost a collapse recently in results. So kind of Raj, uh, with Partey out of the side, is top four totally gone now?
I don't think it's gone, but it's going to be quite difficult. I mean, the team obviously these last 3 games have really put a big dent in that. And so the question just becomes who else is going to drop points. Like, we know Tottenham play at Liverpool, really, really tough game. And so that maybe they'll drop points there, right? And NLD obviously a 6-point swing right there. So I think if it wasn't for that, especially if it wasn't for the derby that can turn everything around potentially, I would say probably yes. And so the thing is just, I think if Tottenham drop those points at Liverpool, if Arsenal can stay within striking distance, potentially for the derby, then yes. And so I think I really want to see how they come out and play today versus Chelsea. Then of course United over the weekend playing in that double pivot because Tavares did look significantly better. Tomiyasu potentially might be back today for a balanced game at least, right? Which is huge for the security of the entire team, especially for the right side. And so, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully, I think Lokonga, people have to forget, Lokonga hadn't played for how long either, right? So he's still getting up to speed again. It takes time to build up that rhythm and that chemistry again. So, and I think, the problem is when you lose Partey, it limits your ability to progress the ball. So people have said, Odegaard hasn't played well since coming back from international break. But if you watch the games, they're man marking him out of the game. And they're saying, hey, if they're letting guys and they're also pressing Ben White because they know who the key progression outlets are. And so if you can get someone like Zombie to play a little bit more progressive, find his confidence and be able to progress the ball, now you can open up those channels again. So in the end, we'll see. In the end, you hope, Zombie can just learn from some of his mistakes and see where it goes. But I don't see any way that they can do it without using that double pivot with Xhaka and Lokonga.
Yeah, it does. It gives the progressiveness whilst also defensive solidity there. And just quickly, I guess, explain why Partey is the biggest loss for you this season.
There's just no one else who comes close to what he can do, right? He's the guy who allows Mikel to play essentially, in that more 4-3-3 that he likes, with Xhaka moving into those advanced positions. And that's when Arsenal were on their great run of form. That's what it was, right? It was Xhaka moving more into that advanced, 8 role and really getting into those spaces because Partey he's so versatile and he's so good both with his deeper progressive passing, but also his positioning and defensive ability that he allows you to tilt the field because you can trust him then to be able to return and make and eliminate some of those risks. It's almost like how when you watch Liverpool with Klopp, right? He has key guys that he went out and got Fabinho and VVD, who he knows even if he plays a little riskier moving up the pitch, he can rely on those guys because they're so good to individually then negate those transitions or whatever it is. And Alisson, of course, as well, right? So Liverpool's able to get away with tilting that field a little bit more and playing a little bit riskier up the pitch. So I think that's what it allows for, is it allows you to be a little more aggressive in your style of play because you have Partey there as a bit of a safety net. And then so whereas with Lokonga, of course, he affects your progression, but he also then affects you defensively because it takes time to be able to develop some of these things and also acclimate to the physicality of the Premier League. And then Partey was really, really starting to acclimate. You were starting to see that guy from Atleti who was dominating the match physically as well. So he's a guy, the gap between him and any other guy in that role is by far the biggest on the team. Like I think we talked about it when Ben was asking us about Tierney and Partey, and then Tavares, when deployed a certain way, in that double pivot, and he's high up the pitch where he likes to be, he can replicate Tierney's role there somewhat, but no one can replicate or come close to replicating what Partey does. So that's why.
I guess one final appraisal question before we move on to the Pogba topic is, does it worry you going forward, the reliance then that Arsenal have on Thomas Partey for the system? Do you think that maybe in the summer, one of the biggest signings we can do is a backup or somebody that can grow into that Partey role? Because he has had a bit of a jaded injury history since he's come to the club. This thigh injury is almost a replica of another injury that he had in a similar kind of vein. And that surely going forward must be a bit of a worry for you.
I mean, yeah, any repeat injury is always a bit worrisome. I think, though, in his role, they're looking for Zombie to be that guy. He's just not ready for it quite yet. And so I think that's really the question. I think, honestly, a different question also becomes is, let's say they bring in someone to play Xhaka's role, right? Is Xhaka potentially now able to play that Partey role to an extent, right? And so that, I think that's also maybe part of the calculation as well, because Xhaka is a very good positional defender in terms of, I mean, that's why Arteta loves him. He's a good, excellent progressor of the ball. And so does he have Partey's defensive range? Of course not, right? And so I think maybe they're going to rely on, of course, Lokonda to be that direct replacement, then maybe Xhaka, you burn in another central midfielder, right, to play in that advanced role, which I think that every indication is that they are. And so I think that's going to help significantly as well. I think the other part of it, honestly, is if they bring in, again, another striker and you're able to actually get goals and increase your margin, now there's less onus on every one of your defenders to have to be perfect, right? So there's a domino effect in that regard as well.
Yeah, I think that the striker situation will be a big kind of add, because pre-show you kind of brought up the data that we're -9 in terms of expected goals. Is that for the season, or is that just?
I think it was. It's either a recent spell. I can't remember the exact data. I cannot remember. I know when I saw it, I don't remember the full context of it though.
Yeah, in terms of XG delta as well. I like Lacazette. I've been a fan of his, and I think he served the club well. But looking at his XG data from around game week 20, so second half of the season, he is -4 XG delta, for that period of the season, just showing that, those 4 extra goals in so many opportunities, so many games, we could be winning, we could be comfortably in top 4. And so that could be the difference next season if we do have a good striker. Let's bring it on to Paul Pogba, though. And we watched, a lot of people watched this match. And one of the commentators' comments was, this could be the last time that we see Paul Pogba in a Manchester United shirt. I'm a huge Paul Pogba fan. No, I kind of like Pogba, but it was quite interesting. It was almost dramatic. Was it sad in a kind of way that the Pogba era could be coming to an end? It's almost like it was written that it's like a whimper rather than an explosion, rather than something impressive. But was that an over kind of zealous examination of the situation? We look at it, it's a calf muscle problem. Is he going to be out for a very long time? Is he going to miss this run into the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it may or may not mean, we don't really know the severity of it yet. All we know, I think Ragnick this morning said that he's going to miss the Arsenal and Chelsea matches, which is about, I think, 8 days. And so, that could indicate a grade 1, but then again, there might just be pending MRI, more imaging, right? And so I think it really just comes down to the severity of the injury. And then there's also significant re-injury risks as well with the calf injury. And then we know with Pogba, he's already missed significant time this season, right? He had that hip flexor tear while he was on international duty. And so when you're missing all this time and your fitness is fluctuating, you're already at risk. And so, and then you add in soft tissue injuries, soft tissue non-contact injuries, you're at even higher risk, right? And so the question becomes, will they bring him back if it is, let's say, a grade 2 injury, which can typically be like a month or so. So it just comes, I think it is, we don't have enough information yet. It's really quite difficult to tell.
And with the discussion as well, the reality is he's not signed a new contract. We're not sure if he's going to be at Manchester United next season, and that's why the commentator said what they did.
Yep.
Will there be a kind of discussion Paul Pogba maybe has with the club or with his representatives that maybe he doesn't want to return? Maybe he wants to focus on returning to fitness. He doesn't want to have a big injury and then put off any club from signing him. Is that a possibility maybe going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes one of two ways. I think one, it's that where he wants to protect his next contract, right, and his next team, or does he potentially want to have a decent end, to this chapter, right? So I think that more comes down to who Paul Pogba kind of is mentally, and we don't know that at all. So I think it's quite hard to tell. But I could see either way. I think this is probably Pogba's last big move in terms of contract. So maybe he is a little bit more conservative with it.
And, his injury history, like you said, all this season kind of points to a conservative approach being needed. I think we've covered it all then with the injury updates there. And as always, I remind people, do subscribe to the channel because we keep you as up to date as possible. And of course, do check out Raj on his Twitter and his YouTube page. You've got fantastic content over there. And we will be back again very, very soon with the latest injury information. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye and I wish you the best of health.